They say every town has its secrets, but mine tried to rewrite the rules right on my front lawn. It started like any other quiet Saturday. Sun climbing over the hills, coffee in hand, my land stretching out like a painting I'd inherited from my grandfather. But peace doesn't last long when power-hungry neighbors decide your land is their playground. They called it community improvement. I called it trespassing. And when they pushed too far, turning my home into their private event venue without a word, well, let's just say they didn't expect the quiet farmer to fight back. But I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for everyone they steamrolled. And they never saw it coming. Let me know if you'd like a dramatic narrator-style voiceover version or an extended cut. Caleb Morgan hadn't planned on waking up to violins. He sat up in bed, blinked twice, and rubbed his eyes as the unfamiliar melody floated in from the direction of his front porch. It was Vivaldi, he thought, or at least some variation of it. But that wasn't the part that concerned him. It was the fact that someone was playing it on his land. He grabbed his boots, still caked with yesterday's soil, and pulled them on without socks. Still in his flannel sleep shirt and jeans, he stepped out onto the porch and froze. His property, his quiet 10-acre sanctuary in Maple Ridge, Oregon, had been transformed overnight into something straight out of a luxury bridal magazine. Rows of white chairs lined up perfectly across his front pasture. A massive floral arch framed the view of his pond. Long tables were draped in white linens, sparkling glassware glinting in the morning sun. A string quartet played softly beside the barn. And there, in the middle of it all, directing staff with the authority of a general, in the middle of a battlefield, was Evelyn Blake, president of the Maple Ridge HOA, and professional meddler in anything that wasn't hers. Caleb's jaw tightened as he walked toward her. His boots crunched over gravel and displaced rose petals. No one acknowledged him, not even the caterers scrambling past with trays of hors d'oeuvres, weaving around flower arrangements that hadn't been there yesterday. "Evelyn," Caleb said, stopping inches from her clipboard-wielding hand. "What the hell is going on?" She turned with the sort of smile usually reserved for press conferences. "Caleb, good morning. Isn't it just breathtaking?" "That's not what I asked." "Oh, don't be so dramatic. We're just hosting a little wedding here today. It's Sophia's big day, you know, my niece from Lake Oswego. We needed a scenic venue, and this spot was just too perfect to pass up." Caleb's brow furrowed. "You're on my property. You're hosting a wedding without my permission, on my land." She blinked, as if the concept of permission was suddenly foreign to her. "We tried to reach you. Several times." "No, you didn't." "Well," she huffed, tapping her clipboard, "as HOA president, I deemed this land suitable for community events." Caleb let out a dry laugh. "I'm not part of your HOA. You've known that since the day I moved in." "Oh, but that's just a technicality. You live adjacent to the community. Proximity means impact. And really, you should want to be part of something bigger." His eyes scanned the yard, catering vans blocking his driveway, strangers trampling the grass he'd planned to mow today, his barn festooned with silk banners. He turned back to Evelyn. "You have 10 minutes to start packing this circus up, or I'm calling the sheriff." Her expression tightened, but she didn't back down. "The ceremony starts in an hour." "Then you're already late." And with that, Caleb turned, stormed back toward his house, not to cool off, but to start preparing for war. Caleb didn't bother slamming the front door behind him. The sound of violin music and clinking champagne glasses still drifted through his window like the world's most ironic soundtrack. He stood at the window, watching the scene unfold. Guests arriving in heels that would sink into his soil, SUV doors slamming shut, and Evelyn practically floating across the lawn in her pearl-laced blazer like she was hosting a charity gala. His blood simmered, not just from the trespassing, but from the sheer audacity. He glanced down at his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. One ring, two. "Yeah, boss," a groggy voice answered. "Reed, open the back gate." "You sure?" "I'm sure," Caleb said, his voice as calm as it was final. "Let the herd out, all of them. And tell Hank to keep filming. I want every second recorded." A chuckle crackled over the line. "Thought you'd never ask." Caleb hung up and stepped out onto his porch, just as the bride arrived in a white convertible. The music swelled. Evelyn clasped her hands dramatically like a theater director witnessing her masterpiece come to life. The couple kissed. Guests applauded. No one even noticed Caleb standing at the edge of the yard, arms crossed like a silent storm on the horizon. But they noticed the cows. The first to appear was Duchess, his oldest, most docile dairy cow, lumbering lazily past the barn toward the center aisle. Then came Big Joe, Diesel, Maple, and the rest of the herd, all 16 of them, released from their morning pen like clockwork. The moment the first cow stepped on a row of white chairs, all hell broke loose. The quartet faltered as Diesel knocked over a speaker stand with his thick, wandering snout. Guests gasped as cows trampled through the aisle, mooing in protest of the floral arrangements now sticking to their hides. One calf licked the back of a bridesmaid's dress. Another took a massive dump right behind the altar. Screams erupted. The flower girl dropped her basket and sprinted back to her parents. Caleb walked down the porch steps slowly, soaking in every moment. "What is happening?" Evelyn shrieked, waving her clipboard like it was a magic wand that could stop 1,500 pounds of irritated livestock. He didn't answer her, just kept walking, until he stood next to the trampled wedding cake. "Duchess," Caleb called out, reaching for the cow's bridle as she casually nibbled on a centerpiece. "You mind keeping it classy, girl?" The bride was in tears. The groom was yelling at the DJ, who was now frantically trying to cover the speakers with a tarp. The best man tripped over a goat, yes, a goat, that had wandered out from the barn and was now chewing through the gift table ribbons like it was Christmas. "Caleb Morgan," Evelyn's voice cracked. You've ruined everything. This is malicious. You will be held accountable for this." He turned slowly, eyes level. "You mean like how you illegally hosted a wedding on private land, blocked my driveway, took money for a venue you don't own, and never even had the courtesy to knock on my door?" She sputtered, but he wasn't done. "I've got footage, eyewitnesses, a county deed proving you have no jurisdiction. And this?" He gestured at the chaos. "This is just nature reclaiming her space." Then, Sergeant Honkers, the farm's notoriously aggressive goose, charged into the scene with a warrior's cry. His wings spread like a fighter jet as he went straight for the groom's leg. Caleb watched it all unfold with a smirk. His land, his animals, his rules. And the war had only just begun. By the time the last chair had been knocked over and the final hors d'oeuvre trampled into the grass, the wedding had devolved into something between a stampede and a reality show meltdown. Guests scrambled for their cars. Bridesmaids cried as goats chewed at their hemlines. And Sergeant Honkers? He stood proudly on the collapsed wedding arch, honking like a king surveying his conquered kingdom. Caleb stood off to the side, arms crossed, letting the scene breathe. He didn't have to say a word. His land, his livestock, and his silence were speaking volumes. Evelyn stormed up to him, face blotchy with rage and mascara streaks. Her pearl necklace bounced with every indignant stomp. She held up her phone like it was a weapon. "You're going to regret this. I'm calling the police." Caleb shrugged. "I'd love to hear what you tell them." "Hi, yes, I committed trespassing and fraud, then got attacked by a goose. Should go over well." She faltered for a second, but quickly doubled down. "You're responsible for thousands in damages. Do you know how much this wedding cost?" "You're asking the wrong guy. You didn't even ask me for permission to use the property." Before she could respond, the bride's father appeared behind her, livid. "You said this was a legitimate venue. We paid the HOA $6,000. $6,000. You told us the land was pre-approved." Evelyn turned, searching for support. But now, she was surrounded by the very people she'd misled. Board members, guests, vendors, even the DJ, who was cradling his ruined speaker like a fallen comrade. It is community land, Evelyn tried, voice rising an octave. It's part of the Evergreen Harmony Association boundaries. No, Caleb cut her off, pulling out his phone. It's not. And I've got the county deed on file right here. My grandfather never signed any HOA agreement, and neither did I. He held it up for everyone to see. The scanned official document from the registrar's office, time-stamped, sealed, with Caleb's full ownership clear as day. The murmurs began, doubts, realizations. The bride's mother crossed her arms. So you're saying this land was never part of the HOA? Correct, Caleb said. Which means Evelyn here not only lied to all of you, but took your money under false pretenses. That's illegal, someone whispered from the crowd. A younger board member, the treasurer, if Caleb remembered correctly, paled. Wait, did you run those payments through our HOA account? Evelyn froze. Did you? He repeated, louder now. Because if you did, and this wasn't sanctioned, it was for the community, she snapped. This was supposed to bring us prestige, put Evergreen Harmony on the map. The bride's father laughed bitterly. Well, we're definitely on the map now. As the HOA that hosted a cow wedding. Caleb exhaled. You all were lied to. You got scammed. I could have pressed charges already, but I haven't. Yet. Evelyn's voice dropped to a low hiss. This isn't over. You're right, Caleb replied, already walking away. It's just getting started. Behind him, the HOA board began arguing. Accusations flew. Evelyn stood alone, clutching her clipboard like a life vest in a sinking ship. But the tide had turned, and she was about to find out just how hard a community could bite back when it realized it had been used. By Monday morning, Caleb's quiet farmhouse was anything but peaceful. Emails had started flooding in overnight, from HOA members, wedding guests, vendors. Everyone suddenly desperate to shift blame, apologize, or in Evelyn's case, escalate. His inbox was a mess, but the most notable message came in bold from a law firm's domain, Wilson & Drake, LLP. It was titled Cease and Desist Notification, Pending Legal Action. Caleb didn't even flinch. He had expected it. Of course she lawyered up, he muttered, sipping his coffee. Inside the email, Evelyn claimed emotional distress, defamation, willful property damage, the cake apparently, and intentional sabotage of a community-sanctioned event. Her lawyers were demanding a public apology, reimbursement for damages, and, laughably, a written agreement to allow future HOA events on his property. Caleb took a screenshot and forwarded it to his lawyer, Ben Ortega, a sharp, no-nonsense legal eagle who had helped his grandfather fight off developers years ago. Ben replied within the hour. Got it. Drafting counteraction. Also, they just made a critical mistake. Let's talk ASAP. At 2 p.m. sharp, Caleb sat across from Ben in his office in downtown Sagebrush, a charming Arizona town with more cow statues than people. Ben held up a copy of the HOA's bylaws. They don't apply to you, he said simply. Never have. You're not part of their jurisdiction. But here's the kicker. Evelyn diverted community funds into this event. That's embezzlement. And if she processed any of the wedding fees through the HOA's nonprofit account, she's looking at serious tax fraud. Caleb blinked. You're saying she could go to jail? Exactly, Ben said, which is why she's trying to scare you into silence. If we go public, her house of cards collapses. Caleb leaned back. So, what's the move? Ben slid a document across the desk. We file for a preliminary injunction, a court order preventing her and the HOA from accessing your land, contacting you directly, or representing it as community property. We attach the deed, the forged agreement she showed the board, and the guest list from the wedding. Let the judge connect the dots. Caleb picked up the pen. By the next day, legal fireworks lit up Sagebrush like the 4th of July. News spread fast. The Sagebrush Sentinel ran a front-page headline. Farmer fights back. Local HOA accused of fraud and trespassing. The town ate it up. Interview requests poured in. Reporters camped near Caleb's fence. And amid it all, Evelyn remained curiously quiet. No press statements. No public appearances. She was hiding behind lawyers, but her silence only fueled the rumors. Then came the real twist. One of the HOA board members, Stephanie Baird, the treasurer, publicly resigned. She released a statement online admitting she had no idea the wedding was unauthorized. She attached screenshots of Evelyn's emails, including one where Evelyn had written, "He never said yes, but it's not like he's going to stop us. And if he does, I'll just spin it like community outreach." The screenshots went viral locally. Evelyn's support crumbled. 3 more board members resigned within 24 hours. Caleb's injunction was granted, and now Evelyn was being investigated not only by the HOA review board, but also the county clerk for filing forged land use forms. Still, Caleb wasn't celebrating. He sat on his porch with Ben that evening, watching the sun dip behind the barn. "Feels like it's all catching fire," Caleb said. "But she's still got something up her sleeve." Ben nodded. "People like her don't just walk away. She's going to make one last play." And she would. Because just as peace started to return, Caleb received one more letter, a formal notice. "Your agricultural zoning status is under review for revocation," signed by none other than the new acting HOA president. Evelyn had stepped down, but she wasn't out. She had passed the torch to someone worse, and now they were coming for Caleb's farm. Caleb stood on the edge of his field, clutching the zoning review letter in one hand and a rusted spade in the other. His jaw tightened as he stared at the spot where the wedding arch had once stood, now reduced to a muddy patch of trampled grass and broken dreams. They weren't just trying to silence him anymore. They were trying to take everything. The new acting HOA president, Harvey Linwood, a real estate agent with an obsession for lawn uniformity and social climbing, had wasted no time picking up where Evelyn left off. And Harvey played dirty. The zoning review notice claimed Caleb's land was being improperly maintained and suggested that the primary use had shifted from agricultural to recreational or event-based. It was a thinly veiled attack, and a laughably ironic one, given who had illegally hosted an event on his land. Ben confirmed it was baseless. But zoning boards are political, Caleb. If they apply enough pressure through the right people, city council, local planners, they might just push it through. Caleb didn't sleep much that night. He watched the security footage, reviewed every document Ben had prepared, and made a decision. If they wanted war, he'd give it to them. But he wouldn't fight it alone. By noon the next day, Caleb called an open meeting. Not at the HOA clubhouse, but in his barn. He sent out flyers, texts, and emails to every neighbor who had been fined for a garden hose, punished for a barking dog, or forced to repaint their mailbox a community-approved shade of beige. To his surprise, nearly 30 people showed up. Some came cautiously, unsure if they were walking into a protest or a potluck. But Caleb stood at the front of the barn with charts, documents, and a whiteboard titled, "When Enough is Enough." "I'm not here to complain," Caleb began. "I'm here because they've crossed a line." He held up the forged agreement Evelyn had passed off as permission. "This is fraud. She lied to the HOA board, to a wedding party, and to all of you." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He gestured to a blown-up image of the zoning letter. "Now they're trying to rezone my land and strip it of its agricultural status. If they succeed, they can do it to anyone." A man in the back raised his hand. "Can they legally do that?" "They can try," Caleb said, "but only if we let them." That's when Elena, his neighbor and quiet ally, stepped forward with a folder. "I used to be the HOA secretary," she said. "I resigned last year after Evelyn fined a veteran for flying his flag too high." She opened the folder. "These are records of misused funds, retroactive fines, and a pattern of personal vendettas. Evelyn may be gone, but Harvey is worse. He's pushing rezoning to devalue farmland, so his company can snatch it cheap and sell luxury developments. Gasps, shouts, outrage. Caleb let it simmer. Then he stepped back in. We don't need to riot, we need to organize. Ben stepped into the barn then, carrying a stack of forms. Petitions, witness statements, community affidavits. If you've been harassed by the HOA, now's the time to speak up. We're filing for a class action injunction. A moment of silence. Then, one by one, neighbors came forward. Mothers, veterans, small business owners, elderly couples, even a teenager who'd been fined for leaving his bike near the sidewalk. They signed, they spoke, they stood. And just like that, the fuse was lit. The next morning, Caleb sent a certified packet of the evidence to the County Zoning Commission, marked urgent. He copied the press. Later that afternoon, local reporters arrived, filming his freshly posted no trespassing private agricultural land signs. That evening, he received a call from Harvey Linwood himself. "You're stirring up trouble," Harvey sneered. "You're going to regret this." Caleb didn't yell. He didn't argue. He simply said, "We'll see you in court." And then he hung up. It started with a hearing, but ended with something far more powerful, a reckoning. The courtroom wasn't grand. It was a modest county room with mismatched chairs and a tired judge whose robe looked older than Caleb's tractor. But to the 30 residents packed into the gallery, people who'd once felt powerless under the HOA's iron grip, it felt like a coliseum. At the defense table sat Harvey Linwood, hair slicked back, smug as ever. He whispered to his attorney like they were discussing dinner reservations. Behind him sat Evelyn, the dethroned queen herself, pretending to be a passive observer, though everyone in the room knew better. Caleb sat at the front beside his attorney, Ben Taylor, calm, prepared, steady. The judge, an older man named Judge Reynolds, glanced at the case summary, then peered over his glasses. "Let me get this straight," he said, voice dry. "The HOA charged this man money for an event he didn't authorize, on land they don't own, and then retaliated by filing a rezoning petition based on activity they initiated?" Harvey's attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, the association was under the impression," the judge interrupted. "What kind of HOA thinks impressions are enough to justify using private land for commercial purposes?" Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The judge turned to Caleb. "Mr. Dawson, would you like to make a statement?" Caleb stood. "Yes, sir. I was raised on that land. It was my grandfather's before mine. I've spent every day trying to keep it productive, respectful, and alive. And the one time I asked them to stay off of it, they didn't just ignore me, they took it, sold it, trashed it, then tried to punish me for not cooperating with their fantasy. That's not a community. That's control." He paused, eyes scanning the room. "They didn't just hurt me. They hurt a dozen families. Elderly couples fined for flower beds. Veterans threatened over flagpoles. Kids punished for riding their bikes too slow or too loud. They've made people feel afraid, on land they own and pay taxes for." Judge Reynolds gave a slow nod. "Thank you, Mr. Dawson." Then he turned to Harvey. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Harvey stood, confident. "We were only enforcing community cohesion. A little order never hurt anyone." The judge blinked, then, without a word, turned to the clerk. "Enter into Record Exhibit D, the financial records and HOA communications provided by Elena Costas." Gasps filled the courtroom. Harvey froze. Ben stood and submitted the stack of documents. "These communications show internal discussions about fabricating easements, targeting Mr. Dawson's land for annexation, and orchestrating fraudulent rezoning petitions for personal gain." Harvey tried to object, but the judge shut it down. "I'm revoking the HOA's petition. Mr. Dawson's land remains zoned for agriculture. Further, I'm referring this matter to the county prosecutor for investigation into civil fraud and conspiracy." Evelyn stood up indignant. "This is absurd. I was only acting in the best interest of Evergreen Meadows. The judge turned sharply. You are not on trial yet, but you may be soon. Court recessed. And outside, as reporters crowded the courthouse steps, Caleb didn't say a word. He didn't have to, because the community did. One by one, neighbors came forward, speaking to the cameras, telling their stories, naming their fears, admitting that for too long they'd let a small group rule with intimidation because they believed they were alone. But now, they were something stronger, united. 2 weeks later, Harvey Linwood was formally indicted on charges of fraud and misappropriation of HOA funds. Evelyn received a subpoena the next day, and by the end of the month, a special vote removed the remaining HOA board members involved in the scandal. Caleb didn't attend the vote. He didn't need to. His work was already done, but Elena did. And when the votes were counted, the new HOA president walked to Caleb's fence line with a peace offering, a mason jar of fresh lemonade, and a handwritten letter of apology signed by over 50 neighbors. Caleb took the jar. He didn't say much, just a nod. That summer, Caleb hosted the first community harvest day on his farm. No one charged a fee. No one pretended to be in charge. Families brought homemade pies. Kids painted signs, and Sergeant Honkers, the legendary goose, was given a tiny honorary medal by a local veteran. As the sun set over the rolling fields, Caleb sat on his porch with Elena and Ben nearby. He could still feel the scar of what had happened, the betrayal, the fight, the days of wondering if it was worth it. But as laughter echoed across his land, carried by the wind like music, he smiled. Because sometimes, the fight isn't about winning. It's about making sure no one else has to fight the same battle again.